heard the keys before I heard his footsteps. It was 3:17 a.m. I know because I'd been staring at the clock for 2 hours, lying in bed with my phone face down on the nightstand, telling myself I wouldn't check it again. The house was completely silent except for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the occasional creak of the floorboards settling. Then came the metallic jingle, soft, almost apologetic, followed by the careful turn of the lock. He was trying to be quiet. That's what made my stomach turn. Not the lateness, not even the fact that this was the 4th time in 3 weeks. It was the care he was taking, the way he eased the door shut instead of letting it click, the way his shoes hit the tile with deliberate softness, like he'd practiced the rhythm, like he'd done this before and learned from his mistakes. I stayed perfectly still under the covers, my breathing shallow, my eyes fixed on the darkened doorway of our bedroom. I could hear him moving through the kitchen, the faucet running briefly, a cabinet opening and closing. He was getting water, taking his time. I imagined him standing there in the dim glow of the stove light, drinking slowly, preparing whatever explanation he'd rehearsed on the drive home. When he finally appeared in the doorway, I didn't move. He stood there for a long moment, his silhouette backlit by the hallway nightlight we kept on for our daughter. I could see him tilting his head slightly, checking if I was asleep, testing. I let him believe it. He undressed in the bathroom with the door mostly closed, just a sliver of light cutting across the carpet. The water ran. I heard the electric toothbrush. 2 full minutes, like always. He was maintaining routine, maintaining normalcy. When he slipped into bed beside me, the mattress dipped gently, and I felt the deliberate gap he left between us. No accidental touch, no unconscious reach for contact. We used to sleep tangled together. Now there were inches, then feet. Now this, a careful, measured distance that felt like policy. "You awake?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I didn't know what would come out of my mouth if I opened it. I didn't know if I'd scream or cry or just ask the question I'd been holding in my throat for weeks. Where were you? But I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. So I stayed silent, and after a moment, I heard him exhale, a soft, almost relieved sound, and settle into his pillow. He fell asleep in minutes. I lay there until dawn, listening to him breathe. Morning came with the alarm at 6:30, the same as always. He reached over and turned it off before the second beep, then sat up slowly, running his hand through his hair. I kept my eyes closed, my breathing steady, still pretending, still hiding. I heard him stand, heard the closet door slide open, the hangers scraping softly against the rod as he selected his clothes. Navy suit, white shirt. The routine was perfect, untouched. He moved through our bedroom like an actor who'd memorized his blocking, hitting every mark exactly right. When he left for the shower, I finally opened my eyes. The ceiling fan rotated slowly above me, and I stared at it, counting the blades, trying to anchor myself to something concrete. 4 blades. White finish. Needs dusting. These were facts. Manageable facts. Unlike the sinking feeling in my chest that told me something fundamental had shifted, and I'd been too afraid to acknowledge it until now. By the time he came back, dressed and cologne-scented, I was sitting up, scrolling through my phone with studied casualness. "Morning," he said, his voice warm. "Normal." "Morning," I replied, not looking up. He moved to his dresser, checking his wallet, his keys, the same small inventory he did every weekday morning. I watched him from the corner of my eye, and he seemed fine, rested even. There were no dark circles, no guilt written across his face. He looked like a man who'd slept 8 solid hours in his own bed. "Coffee's ready downstairs," he said, leaning down to kiss the top of my head. I let him. I even tilted my face up slightly, accepting it like I always did. The kiss was brief, dry, mechanical, a checkbox being ticked. "Thanks," I said. He paused at the doorway, his hand on the frame. "I've got back-to-back meetings today, so I might be late again. Don't wait up." There it was, delivered casually, almost as an afterthought. "How late?" I asked, keeping my voice level. He shrugged, still not quite looking at me. 8, maybe 9. Depends on how the Grayson pitch goes. "On a Tuesday? Big account," he said, flashing that easy smile I used to love. "You know how it is." I did know. I knew exactly how it was. I'd been married to him for 12 years. I'd built a life around his schedule, his ambitions, his needs. I knew the rhythm of pitch seasons and client dinners and late nights at the office. This wasn't that. "Okay," I said. He smiled wider, relieved. "You're the best. Love you. Love you too." The words came out automatically. Muscle memory from 1,000 previous mornings. He disappeared down the hallway, and I heard him stop in our daughter's room. Heard her sleepy 7-year-old voice murmur something. Heard him laugh. That genuine, unguarded laugh he saved for her. Then the front door closed. The house fell silent again. I sat there on the edge of our bed, my phone still in my hand, and realized I'd been holding my breath. When I finally exhaled, it came out shaky, almost like a sob, but I swallowed it down and stood up. I had to get Emma ready for school. I had to make breakfast. I had to keep moving, keep functioning, keep pretending that everything was normal, because maybe if I pretended hard enough, it would be. The kitchen smelled like coffee, and the faint chemical sweetness of Emma's strawberry toaster pastries. She sat at the table in her uniform, swinging her legs and coloring a picture of what appeared to be a dragon eating a rainbow. "Mommy, does Daddy have to work late again?" she asked without looking up. My hand stilled on the coffee pot. "Yes, honey, he does. He's always working late now. He has important meetings. More important than us?" The question hit like a fist. I turned to look at her, but she was still focused on her drawing, pressing the purple crayon hard against the paper, her small face serious and concentrated. "No, baby," I said quietly. "Nothing's more important than you." She glanced up at me then, her eyes, his eyes, that same green gold, searching my face for something I wasn't sure I could give her. "Then why doesn't he come home?" I poured my coffee slowly, buying time. "He does come home. He just comes home late. That's not the same." No, it wasn't. I sat down across from her, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. Sometimes grown-ups have responsibilities that take up a lot of time. It doesn't mean he doesn't love us. She considered this, then went back to her drawing. "Olivia's dad coaches her soccer team. That's nice. And Madison's dad takes her to the park every Saturday." What does our dad do?" The question hung in the air, and I didn't have an answer that didn't sound hollow. What did he do? He used to do everything. He used to be here, present, involved. We used to have Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, and Sunday afternoon bike rides and bedtime stories that turned into tickle fights. When did that stop? I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. It had been gradual, a slow fade, like a photograph left in the sun. First it was 1 late night a week, then 2, then the weekend work sessions that turned into Sunday mornings at the office, then the business trips that seemed to multiply, and I'd accepted it. I'd been understanding, supportive, because that's what you did when you loved someone, right? You made room for their ambitions. You held down the fort. You didn't complain. Except now I wondered if I'd made too much room, if I'd been so understanding that I'd become invisible. "Finish your breakfast, Em," I said softly. "We need to leave in 10 minutes. She nodded and took a bite of her pastry, and I watched her chew, this perfect little person we'd made together, and I felt something crack open in my chest, a question I'd been avoiding. What kind of example was I setting for her? Melissa cornered me at school drop-off. I'd been trying to make a quick exit, head down, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky, but she materialized beside my car just as I was opening the door. "Hey, stranger," she said, her smile friendly but her eyes concerned. "Feel like I haven't seen you in weeks." "Just busy," I replied, forcing brightness into my voice. "You know how it is." "I do." She leaned against my car, casual but deliberate. "That's why I thought maybe we could grab coffee. Right now. 20 minutes. My treat." I hesitated, my hand on the door handle. "I really should." "Claire." She said my name gently, like she was trying not to spook a nervous animal. "When's the last time you did something that wasn't for Emma or David or the house?" I couldn't remember. "Please," she added. "I miss you." And maybe it was the kindness in her voice, or maybe it was the fact that I'd been holding everything so tightly for so long that I was afraid of what would happen if I kept holding on. But I heard myself say, "Okay." 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a corner booth at the coffee shop on Main Street, and I was staring into a latte I hadn't ordered, watching the foam pattern slowly dissolve. Melissa didn't push. She just sipped her cappuccino and waited, giving me space to either talk or not talk. That's what I'd always loved about her. She didn't perform friendship. She just was. "He came home at 3 a.m. last night," I said finally. She didn't react dramatically, just nodded slightly. "Is that new?" "4th time this month." "Did you ask him about it?" "He said he has meetings, late meetings, important accounts." "And do you believe him?" The question sat between us, honest and unavoidable. I stirred my latte with the wooden stick, around and around, creating a small whirlpool. "I don't know what I believe anymore," I admitted. Have you noticed anything else? Changes? I thought about it. Really thought about it. He's careful. Everything he does is careful now. The way he moves through the house. The way he talks. Like he's editing himself in real time. That's deliberate. I know. So what are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? The one I'd been avoiding because I didn't want to face the answer. Because facing the answer meant facing the possibility that my marriage, my life, wasn't what I thought it was. I don't know, I whispered. Melissa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You don't have to know right now. But Claire, you can't keep pretending everything's fine. That's not fair to you. Or Emma. Emma. Always Emma. My daughter who was starting to notice her father's absence. Who asked questions I couldn't answer honestly. What if I'm wrong? I said. What if I'm just being paranoid and insecure and... Then you ask him directly, and he gives you an answer that makes sense and you feel better. But if you're right, she trailed off, letting the implication hang. If I was right, then everything changed. I wasn't the type of person who snooped. I'd never checked his phone, never gone through his pockets, never questioned his word. Trust was supposed to be foundational, and I'd built my entire marriage on that foundation. But foundations crack. It was Thursday afternoon. Emma was at a play date. David had texted that he'd be home by 7, earlier than usual, he'd added, with a smiley face emoji that felt both reassuring and somehow wrong. I was folding laundry in our bedroom when I saw his laptop on the dresser, slightly open. He never left it behind. I stood there for a long moment, a pair of his socks in my hands, staring at that thin sliver of silver. He'd been rushing this morning, running late for a breakfast meeting. He must have forgotten it. Don't, I told myself, but my feet moved anyway. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the laptop in front of me. It was asleep, the screen dark. All I had to do was open it. Just lift the lid, see what was there. My hand shook as I reached for it. The screen woke up, password protected. Of course. I typed in his usual password. Emma's birthday plus our wedding anniversary. Invalid. He'd changed it. That fact hit harder than I expected. He'd changed his password and hadn't told me. Why would he do that unless he had something to hide? I tried a few more combinations. Our address. His mother's name. His old football number. Nothing worked. I closed the laptop, feeling simultaneously relieved and more anxious than before. The fact that I couldn't get in somehow felt worse than if I'd found something incriminating. It was confirmation of suspicion without the relief of proof. I put the laptop back exactly where I'd found it, and finished folding the laundry with mechanical precision. My mind racing. Changed passwords. Late nights. Careful behavior. The pieces were there, scattered like breadcrumbs, but I still couldn't bring myself to follow them to their logical conclusion. David came home at 6:45, earlier than promised, carrying flowers. Grocery store flowers, daisies and carnations in cellophane, but flowers nonetheless. He handed them to me with that boyish smile, the one that used to make my stomach flip. For you, he said, just because. Emma squealed with delight. Daddy brought Mommy flowers. I see that, I said, taking them. They felt heavy in my hands, weighted with something I couldn't name. Thank you. I thought we could have dinner together, he continued. All three of us. Like old times. Like old times. When had the old times ended? How had I not noticed the transition? We sat down to the spaghetti I'd made, Emma chattering about her day, David asking questions and laughing at her stories. He was fully present, engaged. The father and husband I remembered. It was perfect. Too perfect. I watched him across the table, this man I'd known for 14 years, and felt like I was looking at a stranger performing a familiar role. You're quiet, he said, catching my eye. Just tired. You should relax more. Take some time for yourself. The suggestion felt absurd coming from him, from the person whose absence had made relaxation impossible. But I just smiled, and nodded, and took another bite of pasta I could barely taste. After dinner, he insisted on doing dishes. He put Emma to bed, reading her 2 chapters instead of 1. He came back downstairs and suggested we watch a movie, and I agreed, because I didn't know what else to do. We sat on the couch, not quite touching, and I felt the distance between us like a physical thing, vast and unbridgeable despite the mere inches that separated us. Halfway through the movie, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression flickering, just for a second, before he smiled and set it face down on the coffee table. Work, I asked. Just an email. It can wait. but he shifted slightly away from me, his body language closing off, and I absolutely knew, that it wasn't work. The rest of the movie passed in silence, and when it ended, he kissed my forehead and said he was exhausted, heading up to bed early. I stayed on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, and wondered when exactly I'd become someone he had to perform for, instead of someone he lived with. It happened on a Saturday. Emma was at a birthday party, and I dropped her off with promises to pick her up at 4. David had said he needed to go into the office for a few hours, just to catch up on some paperwork, nothing major. He'd be home by noon. At 1:30, he still wasn't back. I called. It went to voicemail. I texted, "Everything okay?" No response. By 2 hours, I'd moved past concern into something sharper, something that felt like anger mixed with fear, mixed with a terrible, creeping certainty. I got in my car without really deciding to, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight, and I drove to his office. His car was in the parking lot. I recognized the small dent on the back bumper from where I'd backed into the mailbox last year, but the building looked dark. I sat there for 10 minutes, watching, waiting. Nothing moved. No lights came on. His car just sat there, abandoned, or placed there deliberately as an alibi. That's when something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, clean break, like ice cracking under steady pressure. I drove to the park near our house and parked under the big oak tree where David and I used to bring Emma when she was a toddler. I turned off the engine and sat there in the silence, my hands still on the wheel, and I let myself think the thought I'd been avoiding for weeks. He's having an affair. The words felt both shocking and inevitable, like I'd been circling around them for so long that actually saying them, even just in my head, was almost a relief. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. Instead, I felt strangely empty, hollowed out, like someone had scooped out everything essential and left just the shell of me behind. My phone buzzed. A text from David. "Sorry. Got caught up. Heading home now." I stared at the message for a long time. 3 years ago, I would have believed it without question. 2 years ago, I might have had doubts, but pushed them aside. 1 year ago, I would have at least wanted to believe it. Now I just felt tired. I typed back, "Okay, nothing more. No, I love you. No, see you soon. Just acknowledgement." Receipt confirmed. When I got home 20 minutes later, his car was already in the driveway. He was in the kitchen, making himself a sandwich, still in his work clothes. "Hey," he said when I walked in. "Sorry about that. The files I needed were buried in the archives. Took forever to find them." I set my purse on the counter and looked at him. Really looked at him. He met my eyes easily, his expression open and apologetic and warm. He was lying. I could feel it in my bones. "It's fine," I said. "You sure? You seem upset." "I'm not upset. Claire." I said, "I'm fine, David." He studied me for a moment, and I saw the calculation behind his eyes, assessing, measuring, deciding how much to push. He must have decided to let it go because he just nodded and took a bite of his sandwich. "I'm going to take a shower," I said. I walked upstairs, closed the bathroom door, sat down on the edge of the tub, and finally, let myself cry. Not the dramatic, heaving sobs I'd imagined, just quiet tears that slipped down my face while I pressed my palms against my eyes and tried to figure out who I was supposed to be now. The woman who confronted him? The woman who pretended everything was fine? The woman who hired a private investigator? The woman who packed her bags? I didn't recognize any of those versions of myself. When I came back downstairs 30 minutes later, showered and composed, David was watching TV. He patted the couch beside him. An invitation. I sat down, leaving that same careful gap between us. "Want to order pizza tonight?" he asked. "My treat." "Sure," I said. And we sat there, side by side, not touching, while he scrolled through his phone finding the perfect pizza place. And I realized that this was our life now. This performance, this careful dance around the truth that we both knew was there, but neither of us was willing to name. Maybe he didn't want to name it, because he wasn't ready to give up whatever he'd found. And maybe I didn't want to name it because I wasn't ready to face what came after. That night, after Emma was asleep, and the pizza boxes were in the recycling, and David had kissed me goodnight with that same dry, mechanical affection, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of my own silence crushing me. I'd become complicit in my own betrayal, not because I was stupid or weak, but because the alternative, blowing everything up, demanding answers, forcing truth into the light, felt impossible to survive. So I chose survival over truth. And in that choice, I lost something I didn't have a name for, something essential, something that might have been my self-respect, or my agency, or simply my ability to believe that I deserved better than this half-life I'd accepted. The ceiling fan rotated above me. 4 blades. White finish. Needs dusting. Facts I could control. Unlike everything else. 3 weeks passed. David continued his late nights. I continued not asking. We continued being pleasant to each other. Polite. Functional. To anyone looking from the outside, we probably seemed fine. Maybe even happy. Emma noticed, though. Children always notice. "Why don't you and Daddy hold hands anymore?" she asked one morning over breakfast. "We do," I lied. "No, you don't. You used to hold hands in the car and at the store and everywhere. Now you don't even sit next to each other." I didn't have an answer for that. So I changed the subject, asking about her upcoming field trip, and she let me redirect her. But I saw the confusion in her eyes, the worry. I was teaching her that this was normal, that this was what love looked like, that you could live with someone and be strangers, that you could sleep next to someone every night and never touch. What kind of lesson was that? Melissa texted me almost daily now. "How are you? Want to talk? I'm here." I responded with reassurances I didn't feel. "I'm fine. Just busy. Let's catch up soon." But I never suggested a time. Never followed through. Because talking to Melissa meant admitting the truth, and admitting the truth meant doing something about it. And I still wasn't ready. I'd become very good at not being ready. At night, I'd lie awake and construct elaborate scenarios in my head. Sometimes I imagined confronting him, demanding to know her name, where they met, how long it had been going on. Sometimes I imagined packing Emma's things and leaving while he was at work, letting him come home to an empty house. Sometimes I imagined pretending I didn't know, just continuing this performance until Emma graduated high school, and I could leave with a clear conscience. None of these scenarios felt real. The only thing that felt real was the growing numbness, the way I moved through my days on autopilot, checking boxes, fulfilling obligations, slowly forgetting what it felt like to want anything. It was a Tuesday morning, unremarkable in every way, when I realized I'd stopped caring. Not dramatically, not with anger or grief or any emotion at all, just a quiet recognition, like noticing the seasons had changed without you paying attention. David was getting ready for work, and I was making Emma's lunch, and he said something about having dinner with clients that night, and I just nodded. He paused, watching me. "You don't mind?" "No," I said, and I meant it. He looked almost disappointed, like he'd been expecting a reaction, and my indifference had thrown him off script. But he recovered quickly, kissing the top of my head before leaving, and I stood there with the sandwich I was making, and realized I felt nothing. Not hurt, not angry, not sad, just empty. And maybe that was the real ending, not the dramatic confrontation or the devastating discovery or the tearful divorce. Just this slow fade into apathy, this quiet acceptance that the person I'd loved had become a stranger, and I'd become a ghost in my own life. Emma came into the kitchen, her backpack already on, ready for school. "You okay, Mommy?" she asked. I looked at her, this perfect little person, and I wanted to tell her yes. Wanted to reassure her, wanted to be the mother who had all the answers. But instead, I said, "I don't know, baby." She came over and hugged me, her small arms tight around my waist, and I held her and realized that maybe she was the only real thing left. That night, David came home at 11:30. I was still awake, sitting in the dark living room, and when he came in, he startled. "You scared me," he said, laughing nervously. "What are you doing up?" "Thinking," I replied. He turned on the lamp, and we looked at each other across the room, and for just a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear, or just exhaustion from maintaining the lie. "About what?" he asked carefully. "Everything," I said. He waited, but I didn't elaborate, and after a long moment, he just nodded and said he was going to bed, and I sat there alone in the half-lit room and knew that this was it. This was the rest of my life, unless I chose differently. But choosing differently required energy I didn't have, courage I couldn't find, a belief in something better that had long since evaporated. So I turned off the lamp and went upstairs and got into bed beside a man who used to be my husband, and now was just someone I lived with. And in the darkness, listening to his breathing even out into sleep, I thought, some endings don't explode. They just fade.